Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And wherever you are watching, thank you so much. Today, let's understand what is an API. All right. And before I start, a very most important ones, the APIs. I would like you guys to like and subscribe my channel. So if you've not been a subscriber, I'm encourage you to subscribe it for more enterprise-related AI content. And thanks for those who subscribe my channels. Okay, what is an API? So API is application programming interface, a set of rules and specifications that allow the software to communicate and exchange the data with each other. So it's kind of like bridging a gap between the application and enabling the work to together. So I'm gonna give an kind of like an example. So if you go to a fancy restaurant and where you sit and you place an order from their menu, so let's say it's like if you requested like what are the food items you wanted to be consumed and order it. So you raise those requests, and the waiter is here has been as a API who acknowledges, right? So within the kitchen and what are the items are being available to serve, and that's how the relation is going to do it with back end of his application and the database, and then he's gonna get the response acknowledgement back and responding into the um, items which has been there to serve to the customer. So this is a kind of like API. So APIs are a kind of like a backbone of the communication over the internet, and every developer needs to learn and understand about APIs and how it's.
Okay, so let me explain the introduction of different types of APIs. So we have the public APIs, private APIs, and partner APIs. So public APIs, which are available for any developer to use it within the minimal restrictions, and private APIs are shared specific between the business partners and the partner APIs, which we calls is ones within the partner ones. And the style of APIs are being the REST API, and which is most popular, and GraphQL, which if you wanted to query a kind of like the data from the database. A REST API is one to one, right? It's most popular. It's been there, but GraphQL is you have that. Connection to the database and fetch it back, and WebSocket for the chatbots, which really have to have to make the connections. And we have the API documentation, the Swagger, and the Postman, and OpenAPI specification, and Dapperbox. So these are the API documentation. What are the API documentation is meant? So whenever you are building a pipelines, you wanted to publish it to your third-party partners or consumers who can consume your API style. So we will do the API documentation for that. And API performance are the key when it comes to the enterprise one. So whenever you build the APIs, they looks for the caching, a rate limit, and the load balancing, and pagination and indexing, and the scaling and performance testing. So APIs are crucial in this juncture. And we have the APIs implementation frameworks, which Node.js is famous for the APIs one. And API terminology is been is fancy one as well. So we have Flask, Node.js, Django, Spring, and FastAPI. FastAPIs are more being for the modern era of our Gen AI ones, where we every request which from a prompt which you goes, it's been fast APIs. API terminologies, we have the header, status, and methods, and cookies, and caching. API authentication is having a basic authentication, token-based authentication, OAuth authentication, and session-based authentication, and JWT token authentication. The API authentication is a key. The reason is like whenever you are interacting with private databases, the authentication is plays the crucial role. And API features, we have the pagination, URLs, query base, path parameters, and API versioning, and content negotiation. And we have the API gateways. So how the API gateways gonna works into enterprise, where you wanted to interact your private APIs which been into your private subnet. So you use the gateways to expose them through treat the public ones. It's kind of act as a portal for the API communication, which how the cloud service AWS have their APIs and Azure API services, and Apache and Nginx is the open source. Whenever you build any APIs, we use Nginx for that. And API integration, we can have that microservices, webhooks, batch processing, and message queue. And so introduction of those APIs, I already informed earlier, the public, private, and partner APIs. We have the terminologies, HTTP version, cookies, REST, and SOAP, and GraphQL. So I'm trying to give that entire the APIs to, kind of lifestyle here. So these are the key things which each API developer has to understand before they, yeah, or why we need this APIs in modern era. That's important one, right? Because APIs are being our to go ones whenever we are building the micro services of micro front end services. The reason is like APIs are allowed to work and communicated with different technologies and applications, and over the internet they can pull the data from a social media app, and it's kind of like a communication channel which established to the numerous services, and it works into a very simplistic way, and developers no need to understand right to enter data which they needs to be fetch it. The APIs as gonna gives you the kind of a simplicity to fetch the only the specific data which they require in a most efficient way, and it's having the reusability and modularity. What it means like you can make the application into smaller component that allow you to be more scalable, and each component is be allow you to be reused, and you don't need to build a monolithic application. So the APIs makes you like a microservices space that easily accessible, and that enable the developer to quickly build the application without reinventing the entire wheel and understanding those entire logics of it. And APIs is been there from a quite a long time, but in a modern era, like where APIs are being a key to any communication which we are trying to do it, like whether we are placing order or we are getting any information, our authentication, authorization to the third party, whether our business transactions, and it's all happening through the APIs. And even in an era of like Gen AI, where the world is being driven by the data, it's crucial to integrate the data with the different systems with authentication and authorization at highest level, which can be achieved by the APIs and the microservice architectures. Whenever whoever talks about the microservices, front end or back end architectures, which they build it right, they can't able to do without APIs. So let's understand the important concepts, components of the production APIs. So it's all starts from deploying the code right from a CI/CDs, whether it's a Jenkins or GitHub, right? So I'm gonna share that image. So and these are the images like the typical architecture of the web application. So it's all starts from the Jenkins and GitHub's ones, and when user request from the browser, right, it will goes to the app server. So it means like whenever you are accessing any request, it goes to the DNS and request, and it's reached to the app services. They have that load balancing and reverse proxy that distribute the request to the application through the content delivery network, the CDN, and app communicate within the front end and back end via APIs, so the API gateway, and back end services going to interact it with the database and distributed cache provided by the data. And these APIs are going to works into the job workers as a job, and it has a Elasticsearch capabilities that's help it. And we have a couple of monitoring tools where we can use APIs. Okay, how do we design an effective and safe APIs? That's a key for enterprise level when you are building the APIs. So let's say like you're designing a shopping cart. So you should know that the use resources, the names to get the query from the particular cart. It's called as a cart operations, which we have a get, post, and place, delete, the ones which call the card. And there is a kind of like when Gen AI comes it like, so we might replace this code operations with agent gen agents. That's gonna be covered in a different topic by me. But it's a kind of like, so if you wanted to get a designing shopping cart where it starts with the number of items, all you need to be like get items sort by the time, right, and filter with the color, and you provided the API key and get this item which you wanted to purchase. It's right now here is a query which is written. So this is a query which has to be sent and fetch these details with the URL and query string and expiry date and body one with the authentication. So and you should define the rate limit as well. We can define those rate limits on the API gateway as well, but this is how you're gonna build a design shopping cart for get the request. So get is like or if you go to any website where in a Myntra is on a website, you go and you wanted to purchase certain dresses. The moment you click it, it's gonna get the fetch the list how many quantities are being currently being there in the warehouse. So those details is gonna comes with authentication with the internal APIs. So design is not just URL path time. We should know, right, what are the proper resource names, identifiers, path patterns, and what a kind of HTTPS header has to be filled into the effective rate limit rules within the API gateway. Those are the key way when you started designing the enterprise APIs. And the approach, it's a crucial here. And there is a two approach. It's called like code first versus API first. So when you are developing APIs for enterprise, you always go with the API first approach. But when you are developing a small startup or organization, right, which just started, you can go for the code first. The reason for the code first is it's more fast, but API first is more organized. So this is a standard which you need to be go with API first. So I've seen like most of the organization they struggled in here. They goes with the code first. Later on, they wanted to be standardize their APIs, and they have to be rewrite the APIs. That's gonna be a then integrate those code and then start releasing it. So the cycle is like design the API first, develop it, and deploy this APIs, push this API documents, write the test case, and then release. This is the more in terms of the enterprise one. And the reason is like microservices when it talks about, right, the reason APIs are more popular and the API developers are going to be more crucial is like the increase of the microservice in the system complexity. If you separate any services, differentiate between the system functions of the system, APIs are better because that allow you to decouple the entire system and segregate what purpose it handles with the different communication. And you can furthermore you can understand like how much usage is happening, and we can understand how responsible we own those components. And that's improve your software quality and productivity and agility and scalability when you go with the API first approach and microservice based APIs. And the key thing is like the authentication, right? In simple terms, what is the authentication is like the protocol for sharing the user authentication across the system. So what, like whenever if you log into the shopping cart, it no needs to be re-authenticated, right? So you have that your APIs can be authenticated in OAuth 2.0. So for example, if you see it like it has to the server, and you have the identity provider. So identity provider is gonna share you like who you are, right? Let's say like I'm logged in with my Google account. So I have my own other identity provider. It's understand from where I am logged, trying to access that information. And then it started giving, it's the moment when I hit the APIs, it's understand my identity provider, and then it acknowledges that, and then it's start providing the service. So OAuth is the kind of like the middle authorization, right? That's how the flow is going to work, right? Whenever you are accessing from your Chrome browser, it gets my detail and it's authenticating with the server, and it's get my IDP detail and it's validated me, and then it's give me the access that okay, you can able to log in and access the ones. So that's measure, because if you look at any modern way of like building your application. So if you go and try to access it, it'll ask like which way you want to authenticate, either to your Gmail or your Facebook authentication. So they are providing the federal authentication within. If you are an enterprise level, you can have your own identity provider within that. You can build into the server in which share the details, who is this user and what roles he's having it, what kind of a data he can able to access. It's key for, and it's very powerful framework to allow the different application to securely interact it with each other. And it's, as I said, like it has that identity provider. So it's get that OAuth token and represent your identity and permission levels which you have it, and it's allow the single sign-on to multiple services. You don't need to log in again. It has a more kind of like a safer, and it authorized across the system with your OAuth token, and it can access to your user profile. So it's very powerful when you are building it. And when you build the APIs, as I said, like the performance is key, and security is one more thing, the session and cookie and JWT1 token and SSO once. Let me explain to everything at one go. If you have a browser, you provide a username and password, right? And then you have the session details in a cookie which gonna keeps your details, and it has a JWT token with the, and the token is gonna validate that allowed to you to authenticate it with the different system, right? So that's how it's working with now. Sessions is here like where the enter your server, store your identity, that allows to log in state, because sometimes if you log into one time to your Amazon or Flipkart, it doesn't ask you to log into it again because it has your session. The server is keep your identity every time you're accessing through the browser with the ID cookie. It's gonna gives you the safer one, so that user no need to be give that provide the identity again once he's login. And that's going to be has a token, web based token with the digital signature. It's going to communicate with the no server sessions it's needed. And SSO is key, where single sign on every time you need to log in whenever accessing the multiple sites. Within the sites it's going to be access, and it's going to fetch your data. And as this is most important, right, this is like what are the, I'm going to share you 30 useful apps that you can help in 2025. So here is those apps. Like if you wanted to go the general purpose, you have the ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity is the key one. It's going to access you, it's going to provide you all the internet data. So try to use this AI apps. Writing any time code, you can go with the Copilot. It's charge you, but you can go to the cursor and reply to where you can start writing your code with a couple of prompts. Productivity, we know that Gemini with but AI is a Gamma is a based tool deck, which I covered in my previous session. So you can write a prompt, it generate your PPTs. And there is one more like audience building. So if you wanted to build videos without your face and your voice, you can use that agent. You can start giving the prompts, you can build it. And for the creativity, you can use 11 labs, and you can use to build your songs, which are the ones you wanted to. One for learning and growth, there is like notebook where you can, I shown it like how to create a podcast within 1 minute, where you can upload your uh, documents and you start reading to it. And thank you so much for watching.